We're working in the StarCraft Create software today. And I'm going to show you some fun ways that you can make some borders and other elements with this software. I started off with just putting a circle shape in there. And then I went over to the right hand side and unlocked the proportions so I could make it a perfect circle. Create software puts things in as you draw them, not in a perfect circle. And then I'm just gonna go over and change the color to something bright so it stands out. I like to do this when I'm working with elements because it helps me to see them better. So that I just did Control C, Control V to copy and paste. You can also right click on any element to get the copy paste functions. I am going to go up to the top and go to Object, Alignment, and then I'm going to align the centers. I could have done align top or align bottom also, but basically I want these to both be perfectly aligned. Now when I hover over it, you can see where the overlap is, makes kind of a petal shape. So I'm going to go to Path, and then I am going to choose Intersection, and that's going to leave just where those two shapes intersected. I think this looks kind of like a stylized petal. So now that I have a petal, I want to turn it into a flower. So I'm going to go to Object and then use Duplicate, Rotate. And you can see here I can change how many of the element it's making duplicates of. So then I can make a flower out of all these little petals. I can even tell it to group those elements together. So then this is going to select as one big flower that I can resize it, move it around, duplicate this all together versus having to work with each individual petal. So that's how easy it is to make a little flower. Now for the inspiration piece. I wanted to make a border similar to the one you see in this Pinterest. So I'm going to need some copies of this, and I'm using a rectangle that is 4 1/4 and 5 1/2 to kind of be my base that I'm designing things to. So I'm just doing Control C, Control V to copy and paste these flowers. And I'm trying to put them at somewhat of a angle, but I know they're not going to be spaced perfectly. I can put the first and the last one so they're perfectly aligned through the center of the flower with the edge of the card template. Now I'm going to select all of the flowers, and I like to do this from the layers panel over on the right hand side. If you hold down your shift key on your keyboard while you're selecting, that allows you to pick more than one layer at a time. And then I'm going to go to Object and say Distribute Space Horizontally. And that spaced all those flowers out perfectly. And then I'm going to ungroup just the first flower and the last flower so I can take away some of those petals because I don't want the ones that are hanging off the edge. With these petals that are partially on the card, I want to kind of slice them or cut them in half. So I'm going to make a copy of the card base. And I'm going to right click and go copy, and I'm going to go paste in place. This put it exactly on top of the original rectangle. I can then go over to the layers panel, and it's going to be the top layer on the panel. So I can just turn that off and hide it so that it's there when I need it. Now I'm going to select just those four petals that are hanging half on, half off. And I am going to go up to Path and use Union to make them one element. Now that they're working together, I can go to Path and say Exclude. And when I use Exclude, what happens is it's going to just remove everything except for the half of those petals that I wanted. Then I'm going to use the little eyedropper tool and just make them match color wise. And then I am going to go over to the layers panel and turn on our card piece. Remember, this is the one we did copy and then paste in place because we knew we were going to need it again later. I'm going to go up to Object and I'm going to use Arrange to send the card to the back so I can see the flowers. Then I want to pick on all of the flower pieces and all of the petals because remember the petals are separate since we ungrouped. I'm going to go to the effects and use the shadow layer to put an offset or shadow around these flowers. When I click OK, you can see the offset there. Now I want to cut away the white part of the card that is below the offset because I'm going to have this kind of flower shaped edge. So I'm going to pick all the flower pieces in the bright yellow and I'm going to group them so that I can turn off that whole grouping from the layers panel and turn off all my flowers at once. Once I did that, I noticed that there were some little pieces or nodes in the center of those flowers. So I am using my shape tool, which is that third button down on the left, and it's allowing me to then select those individual nodes and delete them. If I would have known those were going to come in when I made the offset or the shadow layer, I could have used the button that said blackout, which means fill in any of those little pieces. Since I didn't, I can manually remove the nodes. Now I am going to right click on this offset or shadow piece and do the copy paste in place so that I have a second copy of it that'll turn off. But now I can select both of these pieces and I am going to go up to path and say exclude. And you can see that removed the shadow or offset piece from the larger rectangle. Then I'm going to use this little thing called stencil bridge. And when I put that stencil bridge in, you see how that just sliced those and separated them? So now the top is separate from the bottom. And then I can click on the shape tool again, which is going to turn on my nodes. And then I can click on one of the corner nodes down at the bottom and see how I just was able to remove the entire bottom half. Now, getting these little side pieces is a little harder because I was having problems selecting this piece and then having the node stay turned on. So I zoomed in to get a closer look. And I think the problem was that this piece was not my top layer. So the lesson here is to learn from my mistake and make sure whatever layer you're trying to work with is the top layer. Otherwise, you're going to be like me and kind of struggling to activate and turn on that layer over and over again. I just wanted to point out that right here, this is where I realized it needed to be the top layer. See, now when I click on it, it activates right away. Now I'm going to go to the layers panel and turn on that offset or that shadow layer. You can kind of see our design coming together. I'm going to select everything and then I'm going to go up to the top panel and choose Path Union. And that is going to join or connect those two pieces together. Now I'm going to grab one of our rectangles that represents our card. And I am going to select the piece I just joined together with Union and the card and use the alignment tools to align them centered over each other and the tops of them to each other. So now, while I still have those two layers selected, I can go to path and say intersection. So then everything that was intersecting is what is left. So this is the shape I was going for. I can now see those little nodes that were basically the line right where the two pieces were touching each other. That's okay. I can do a shape tool so I can turn on nodes and delete them. Next, I went over to the layers panel and I just dragged the layer with the bright yellow flowers to the top. You could also click on that layer and then say arrange, send to front. Now with both of these layers selected, I can go to path and choose back minus front. So that is going to cut the front pieces out of the back piece. And now I'm just going to change the color to something prettier than this kind of mustard yellow. And there we have our design. So now this can go on the front of a card. You could use this for a birthday card, a thank you card, Mother's Day card. I mean, the possibilities are endless. I have an example of how I used it at the end of this video. But before we get there, I want to show you another thing. I went to the image library and I found this little raindrop. And then I went to Object and picked the Rotate Duplicate, just like we did to make the flower. And then I started playing with that to try and make another sort of flower. And when I did this one, it kind of has a star flower kind of feel to it. I even joined or used union to join the pieces together. I wasn't a huge fan, so I just went undo until I had just the teardrop or the raindrop left. Then I went over here and I flipped it. So now the drop points down. So now let's grab object and the duplicate rotate. And now when I increase the numbers, I'm liking that flower better. So if your object that you're trying to duplicate and rotate just isn't rotating the way you expected, go back, maybe flip it, and then you can play with it some more. And then I did group this. And I could go through the same process we did to make the original flower border with this new raindrop created flower and make a whole border series with that. Another thing I did, because there were so many fun buttons to play with in that whole um, duplicate rotate options, I can play with the offset, which means how far apart those petals are, either the horizontal or the vertical. So when I did that and just kind of played with it and started clicking at it, you can see basically made a smaller center for the flower. So I hope you learned something new and enjoyed this video. Before you go, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. I love to hear from you.